Welcome to the Pulpit Show. It's Mark Joseph. Thank you for joining us. Our special guest today is Mr. Paul Feig, the noted writer-director. Paul, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mark. Good to see you.
Well, Paul, the last time we talked, you had just directed an amazing movie that I loved called I Am David.
Yeah.
What have you been doing since then?
Picking up unemployment. I've been directing a lot. I direct a lot of television also. I've been lucky enough to work on some very good shows like The Office and Arrested Development and Weeds and Mad Men and all kinds of things. And did another movie that came out last December called Unaccompanied Minors. It was a Christmas family film that is out on DVD now. And it's, you know, we didn't go through the roof, but it's a very nice little film. So doing that and a lot of writing. I have a couple books out and have another book coming out next year. So.
Well, you're one of these multi-talented guys. It's hard to put in a category. You write, you direct, you write books, screenplays. Yeah. I mean, a little bit of everything. What about the creative process do you especially enjoy? That's a common thread that runs through all those things.
Well, I just like I like kind of producing things that hopefully people can kind of relate to. I mean, you know, a movie like Unaccompanied Minors is more just like a fun romp, but I really like, you know, I created a show, Freaks and Geeks, and like with that and with the books, I like telling stories that people either relate to or that we can all go, oh, I did that or I forgot about that. In some ways, I like to be the guy that remembers stuff everybody else likes to forget, you know, and then force it in your face and make you remember it.
Now, you created Freaks and Geeks.
Yeah.
Walk us through that process. How did that happen?
Well, I mean, usually when you create a show, you have an idea and you go to the networks and you pitch the idea and then they buy the idea and then you write an outline for it and then they approve, you know, they give you notes and you go back and forth and you write the script and they give you notes. This one, I wrote it as a spec script. They call it speculative. I don't know. I guess it comes from speculation. I don't know. It's a script that nobody wanted, basically. Right. I wrote it just because I had this idea, and I always wanted to do a show about high school, and I'd always grown up seeing shows and movies about kids in high school that didn't feel like it had anything to do with anybody that I went to high school or my experience or the people I knew. So I thought, I want to write about my experience, and so did it in this 1 hour format. And when I wrote, after I finished writing it, Judd Apatow is an old friend of mine. We were stand-ups together. I've known him, you know, since he was 17 years old. And he, at that time, had a deal over at DreamWorks because he had just come off the Larry Sanders Show and was looking to develop shows. And he said to me, have you ever have a TV idea? Let me know, because he had seen this independent film I made about a year prior. So once I wrote this, I was like, this is really Judd's sense of humor. I think he would get this the way I do, and sent it to him, and within 12 hours, he was like, I want to make this. And we sold it to DreamWorks, and then they sold it to NBC, and very quickly we were on the air. So we were very much an anomaly in that it didn't go through any development, and we actually sold it at the end of sold to NBC at the end of January, which is right when they're greenlighting their pilots. And they were trying to develop a high school show and didn't like any of the scripts they had at the moment. So we just kind of came in, and it was crazy. I mean, we were literally, suddenly I had a TV show, you know, and so it was great. And then we made it, and it got critically got a lot of acclaim, but ratings-wise, it just didn't do well. And we made 18 episodes, and then got canceled. And it's had quite a secondary life on DVD, which has been nice.
What did you draw on from your personal experiences in high school to make that show?
Well, it was just so many shows about high school are about either the beautiful kids or, you know, about all these problems with dating. And there always been very grown-up problems that these kids had. And there was kids around me that were sort of mature and were, you know, doing that kind of stuff. But the majority of us, especially my friends, we were just kind of these geeky guys who, you know, we weren't really in any clique whatsoever. We were just sort of these normal guys who were trying to get through the day, and we had kind of nerdy things we were into. But then I was also friends with a lot of the burnouts or freaks or whatever. And so I realized, kind of going like, well, we were all kind of different levels of outsiders with our different groups, and so, you know, they were always called the freaks in our school. And then geeks, I kind of made more, you know, the poor nerd geek character, which is now having a revival, but now geeks on TV are these handsome guys with kind of weird haircuts, you know. But in the past, it used to be just, you know, the geek was the guy with the tape on his glasses and snorted, and he had flood pants and his shirt buttoned up to the top. And it's like, well, we had a couple of kids like that in our school, I guess, but you know, they were just sort of so weird we couldn't deal with them. So just the geeks to me are just sort of awkward outsiders, and so I kind of just drew from characters that I knew and grew up around and based it on that. And then once we cast the show, we really retrofitted the parts to the actual actors that we had on the show, and many of them now have gone on to great success, like Seth Rogen and Jason Segel and Linda Cardellini, Busy Phillips, for James Franco, the whole gang. So yeah, so it was a great springboard for a lot of people.
And then from there, you moved on to direct.
Yeah. I mean, I directed the season finale, the series finale of Freaks and Geeks that I also wrote. And I always loved directing. I went to USC Film School and just always, my original goal when I was a kid, I wanted to be Woody Allen. I wanted to star and write and direct my own stuff. And then I was an actor for a long time and eventually learned, I think I'm better off behind the camera where I can direct and use other much more talented actors to tell stories and to help them look their best and be their best. And so I really find it the most fun. I mean, my favorite thing to do is to write and direct, to write what I'm going to direct. But that said, I've gotten to direct things that that I haven't written, especially in television, and that's very fun because if you get something great like working on The Office or Arrested Development, you're getting these amazing scripts and with an amazing cast, and so it's just your job to come in and hopefully translate what is so funny on the page onto the screen and really facilitate it. It's fun. I mean, I like that challenge, and I love doing comedy because that needs a slightly more careful hand sometimes, and some people can do comedy, some people can't, and you really need to make sure you're in sync with the style of comedy that you're directing. And so I only tend to pick shows that I really kind of get and like the style of.
And you've always done stand-up?
I did. I mean, I started doing stand-up when I was 15 years old, and my parents used to have to take me to the nightclubs so I could perform because I was too young to get in. That was back in Detroit. And then I was always flirting with it through college, and when I got out of college, I got a film degree from USC and went right into being a script reader for a producer named Michael Phillips, who produced Taxi Driver and Close Encounters and all these things. And but during that, I wanted to get back into stand-up, and so went back into stand-up just at the open mic nights and was starting to get some heat from it, or just getting in with the clubs. But I knew I needed to kind of quit my day job and just go full-time at it. But I couldn't afford to. So I ended up going on the $25,000 pyramid as a contestant and won $29,000, an extra $4,000 because I'm an overachiever, and was able to quit my job with their blessing. They were very nice, and then I went off and had a stand-up career for about 5 or 6 years, and then during that segued more into acting and did the acting bit. I was a regular on 5 different TV series that all got canceled at some point, but that was fun, and I got to do my craft, but I also got to learn the behind the scenes even more than I did in film school. And then from there just kept realizing I just really wanted to segue into the writing and directing, and was able to do that. I was a regular on Sabrina the Teenage Witch, the first season. I was Mr. Poole, the science teacher. And so finally, like after 5 failed series, I had like a show that I was on that was a hit. And so we finished the first season, and I'm just celebrating, finally. As an actor, it's all you want is like a hit show. So I've got it, and I take my money and I make this independent movie and spend it all on this thing called Life Sold Separately. And literally, as I'm in post-production and writing out checks, they call me from the show. I was like, hey, we got some bad news, we're gonna write you out of the show. And it's like, oh God. But it was good because it was the thing that kicked me out of the nest. Because I knew that I wanted to dedicate myself to behind the camera. And so once they had done that, it was like, you know what, this is a sign. I'm just going to go and things have been so much better since I've gone.
So you haven't gone back to acting since then?
No, I mean, I occasionally people will ask me to be in stuff. I mean, like I have 2 lines in Knocked Up that I did just because Judd's a friend, and he said, would you come in and ad-lib some lines making fun of Paul Rudd? And it's like, okay, so it ended up in the movie. So anything like that, I'm happy to do, but I don't go out and to be an actor, it's all about dedicating your life to auditioning and working your craft, and I did it, and now I have much more fun auditioning. I'd rather audition people than be auditioning for people. So
we'll be back in just a moment on the Bully Pulpit Show. Stay tuned. back with writer-director Paul Feig. Paul, I wanted to ask you about, first of all, the movie I Am David.
Yeah.
But that happened right around the time of, I think, 9/11.
Yeah.
When you were starting to think about that movie. And what was that like? But also, what was comedy like pre and post 9/11? It seemed like for a while that people were afraid to be funny, especially in the aftermath of 9/11.
Well, I mean, 9/11 made everything seem so trivial. And especially, the weird thing was, and I wrote a little op-ed for the New York Times that they didn't publish, thank goodness. But kind of putting in perspective, like, when it happened, all you heard was people going like, "God, it looked like a movie. It looked like a movie." And it's like suddenly for me, it felt like, oh God, we are producing those images, and not myself personally, I didn't do those kind of stories, but just the industry I'm in is doing those kind of, lots of action and things blowing up and kind of human tragedy for entertainment occasionally, or, even if it's used to get to the, to prove a point or give a message about something else. And it's so, just the bottom line is it kind of made all of us in the business kind of go like, what we're doing is trivial. I mean, so many people were just, including myself, were like, I have to do something else. I got to get, do something that means more and is more important. But I think then we all very quickly realized that half of us in the business, there's nothing else we can do. It's like fly off and teach, stand-up classes and, in a third world country or something. So for me, with I Am David, I was supposed to start writing that script literally the morning of 9/11. I had other jobs and they ended. I was like, okay, Tuesday morning, I'm going to start writing this script. And woke up and clearly couldn't do anything for 2 weeks. But since that was such a story of kind of this kid going through this hellish situation and kind of rediscovering his hope and his faith in mankind, it actually ended up very selfishly for me being a way for me to kind of work through both that tragedy, and my mother had just died a few months previously. So that's the great thing about getting to do, if you're lucky enough to get to do what we do in the creative world, is you can sometimes use it as almost this, it's a bit of therapy, as long as you figure out how to make it so that it's universal and it has a message for people and it can help people kind of go through an experience and come out the other side feeling better. That's what I think the best entertainment does.
Now, David was originally called something else, right?
Well, yeah, I think it was called I Am David in Europe, but when they released it here, it was called Escape to Freedom. And then I like the title. Escape to Freedom sounds like a Civil War movie or something, So and I like kind of making the title was actually had to do with the last moment of the movie and all this. So yeah, but we played around with it. But they ended up re-releasing the book when the movie came out in the U.S. under I Am David. So.
Now, it was a very spiritual book.
Yeah.
And how do you take those spiritual ideals and visions and translate them into film? And what are you looking out for? Well,
you know what it is? I mean, I don't like to exclude anybody from anything, and I don't like to set up anything in entertainment where like part of your audience goes like, oh, gets turned off or kind of close it off. For me, it was very much, even though the book is a very spiritual book, it has some religion in it. Also, like some kind of blatant religion where the kid keeps saying the Lord's Prayer, and there's kind of some heavy-handed stuff that happens in there. The general message of the movie for me was, you have not giving up on your faith in mankind. You can be cautious and you can go through these things and you can learn that there is a dark side to people or to certain people and to be aware of it, but also, the minute you just give up hope and you just go, the world is terrible and I give up, I don't trust anybody, then you can't live your life. Then just become, you have to be able to, even if you're cautious or if you're, even if you have your doubts, you have to try to overcome that, because you'll just withdraw and you won't be able to leave the house. And so for me, it was bringing that message out in the movie and trying to pull out some of the more blatant. I just didn't want a kid walking around saying the Lord's Prayer. It's not cinematic. It's really, you can't. People don't talk to themselves generally in real life. You sort of mumble to yourself, kind of, but you don't have. So I always kind of when I'm watching a movie and somebody's talking to themselves, because it's very unnatural. But I also don't like narration and voiceover, because I think that's kind of a cheap way to do it. So the hardest part about David was figuring out how to do it with as little dialogue as possible and trying to show it as visually as possible.
And you did that by having him go to a church?
Yeah. Well, I kind of. He's looking around and he goes to this bakery and he's hungry, and then he sees this holy card of St. Elizabeth, and the baker tells him, well, that's the patron saint of bakers, but she'll, if you pray to her, she'll answer all your questions, because he was, he's a religious, Catholic baker. They're in Italy and stuff. So David just hears somebody will answer, will help me. Who's this? And so he kind of takes the card and talks to the card, and it was a way to kind of you want to physicalize things. I mean, when I was in film school, the big example of that was in the movie E.T. In order to physicalize this, that he is dying and be able to track that, they did the thing with the plant. So he comes up and the plant's alive, and he's alive, and when you see that the plant's dying, he's dying. That's a great way to do it, as opposed to having go like, you're dying, and like I'm, having everybody saying what's going on. It's always great to do a physicalization of it. So for me, that holy card was a physicalization, because at some point when he meets up with this rich family and he kind of falls in love with the daughter in the family, but then he realizes he has to leave, he goes in and leaves the card with her saying, take care of her. St. Elizabeth, take care of this girl. So as opposed to just going in and praying, it's just finding those ways to, physicalize things.
I'm biased because we both worked in the film, but what a great ending that film had.
Oh, thanks. I'm real proud of it. I mean, some people, it's a dividing line for some people. I've had, and it drives me crazy, it's always old guys come up to me and go like, because you see, I don't want to give away the movie, but it's basically, there's a reunion in it with this mother and son. And the mother is very stoic during the reunion, because it's been a long time since she's seen the child. She thinks he's dead. She's also a very kind of a stoic person. And so it's not this sloppy running up and falling and hugging. It's a very, everyone's very cautious because they don't know who's damaged and all that. And it drives some people, drives old guys crazy. They're like, there's not a mother in the world that wouldn't run and cry and grab them. It's like, well, okay, thanks. Thanks, man.
How did David keep his faith in mankind through all the horrible things he saw? And how do you keep your faith in mankind in Hollywood? Because you see a lot of the worst of human behavior, I'm sure, as we all do.
Exactly. Well, I mean, two different things, really. I mean, for the I Am David, I had many sleepless nights where I would go, how can I possibly tell this story? I was not a kid who grew up in this hellish communist labor camp and went through this, I had a very nice childhood in Michigan, so how can I tell the story? And all you can really do, and this is the chance you take when you're doing, when you're creating stories that didn't actually happen in real life to a real person. I mean, I Am David is a made-up story written by Ann Holm, this author. So you kind of have to, all you can do is say, how would I react if I was in that situation? And you don't know. You never know. I mean, I can't say, oh yeah, I can imagine what it's like to be in a hideous labor camp. I can't. All I can basically is go off of the material I have and the way that she wrote it, and then put myself in the head of this kid and try to figure out how to portray it, how I might feel. You never know if you're accurate or not. The only thing I know that was the nice validation for me was after we made the movie, the United Nations, their High Commissioner for Refugees, saw the film and said they thought it was the most accurate portrayal of a refugee child by the way he acted and how stoic and kind of closed off he was. So for me, that was at least go like, well, I think I might have, I think I got it kind of right, or we got close. But part two of your question, as far as the business, and the thing about the industry is people, when you fall apart in the industry, is when you don't realize it is a industry, it is a business. And it's a terrible blending of two things, because we go in as artists, we like to think we're artists, with all our artist foibles and passions and emotions, and that's what makes an artist great, that they have all this passion and emotion. But at the same time, if you don't go in going like, but this is a business, like the auto industry and like every industry in the world, where they are going to give you X amount of money, and out of that X amount of money you have to produce a product that's going to create Z amount of money, you can't go too far either way. If you're just thinking total business, you just create something that just is very manipulatively going for commercial purposes. Not a bad thing, but if you try so hard to just do that, chances are you'll fall on your face, because you will just be trying to recreate things that made money before, and you don't know. The public changes constantly, thank goodness. If they didn't, we just get the same thing over and over again. But then if you're the other way and you're just so passionate and can't see that this is still a commercial medium that needs to get a big audience in. It's one thing if you're making an indie film and you're just like, I just want to be pure with this, that's fine. Even an indie film you can't make these days, because the people, unless you're going to fund it yourself and you say, I don't want to get my money back, people expect a return on their money. It's sad, it's ugly, it's not, it'd be nice if we were sort of sponsored and could just make what we want.
It's not a charity.
No, it is a commodity, and you need to do, you need to look at it that way. I don't think, you just need to be pure in your head of like, I think this is great. And I think this will appeal to people because it appeals to me on a gut level. And the criterion I always like to run too is this going to not bring the general tone of the world down? You know, and that's a tough one. I'm not a moralist by any means. I don't look at stuff like, oh, how dare they make that? All I think is like, it shouldn't, you know, you should make something that at least has some kind of a hopeful message or just something uplifting that makes you feel good, you know, or if it's going to be a tragedy, do you learn a lesson from that going like, oh, that's a cautionary tale, you know, and once again, you want to moralize, but, you know, just, because you can easily, there's plenty of the, you know, the dark side of people you can appeal to and make a ton of money. You know, and that's, hey, if you want to do that, that's fine. I'm not going to moralize about that either. It's just I don't want to spend my life kind of doing that kind of thing.
We'll be back in just a moment with Paul Feig. Stay tuned.
Where are you off to? Such a hurry, girl. There's something chasing you. What has you spinning round in circles, little girl? Is it the world or is it you? There's no use trying to stop this. There's no use trying to make it go away. Before you disappear, just give it time.
We're back with writer-director Paul Feig. Paul, I want to talk to you about your post-film directing career. You've done a lot of things after I Am David. Just catch us up on what happened after I Am David, and were you pleased with the way it came out and the way it did?
I was happy with the movie I Am David. The release was a bit of a disaster. I mean, we got sold to one company who was very excited about the movie, and then in the Variety that day, there was an article about, in the back of the trades, about how they had bought our movie, and the quotes from the head of the company saying how much he loved it, and he was going to do all this stuff, and then you turn to the front page, and it said, that company's been bought by another company, and that guy who liked your movie has been fired. So it's like, oh, okay. So then the company that got it is a company that releases horror movies and all that thing. So they
Which this happens all the time. I
Yeah.
mean, in
Oh, yeah.
every line of creative work, right?
Oh, yeah.
Companies are acquired, and people who liked it are no longer around. And
Well, and that's the problem with, you know, with a movie or anything. You are a commodity. You are one piece of business that they get, or one product that they get. And so one company knows how to sell a product or is interested in that product, and another company says we don't know what to do with that. And this is a company that knew how to sell horror movies, and they didn't know how to sell a little uplifting family drama. And so since Jim Caviezel was in the movie, they just kind of, Passion of the Christ had just come out, even though we made our movie first. It just took us that long to get distribution for it. They just said, well, we don't know what to do, so where was Passion of the Christ biggest? What cities? And so they kind of figured out these 13 cities across the middle of the country, released it there. They didn't even release us in New York or LA, which would have made us eligible for any kind of awards or anything like that. You know, and it died because they didn't do any ads. They did a few terrible ads for it. So it kind of died. The good thing is it's kind of found its life on DVD. That's the greatest thing about doing recorded medium now, like movies and TV shows, is they exist forever. And movies have more of a life on DVD these days. I think that the studios even look at the theatrical release now as just kind of a big ad for the DVD. And if they make money in the theaters, that's fine, but then they know they're going to make the money down the road in that.
what was Caviezel like to work with? You worked with Jesus before he was Jesus, basically.
Yes, exactly. He actually, when I was working with him, I think a couple of days into when I first met him, he pulled me aside and said, hey, I just want to tell you, I got this, Mel Gibson said, you want to play this part? So it's like, oh, that's cool. We actually ended up, this is when we came out, we got, some people accused me of stealing all the cast members from Passion of the Christ, because 6 of the people in Passion of the Christ are in my movie.
Same casting director.
Yeah, same casting director, exactly. So she funneled, so what happened was basically we cast our movie, did it, and then when Mel went to her to cast theirs, she was like, oh, I have all these great new people, so gave them to him. His movie came out first, did great, and then mine came out, and it was like, hey, you stole it. And it's like, no, he stole mine. Mel, coming to get you. But it worked out great, it worked out fine.
You made a little less money.
Yeah, just slightly. I think we could have covered the catering for one day on his. So yeah, so that was, it was, yeah, but Jim is great. Jim was really a joy to work with. And I kind of, I was a little nervous when he first came in because I didn't kind of know what to expect of Jim, because I liked his work, but I just, I didn't know. And he's when you first meet him, he's a very quiet guy. I was like, does he hate me? Or is he? But then he opens up, and he was a real joy to work with, because I like to be able to kind of give direction in the middle of a take. So if somebody's doing something and go like, oh, take it again, I think, you're sadder this time, or take it again, try it. You're more worried, or you're giving directions, because a lot of actors don't want to admit, and probably a lot of actors will hate me for saying this, it's movie acting is moments. You're supplying little tiny moments. Sometimes you're supplying big moments, that speeches or big scenes, pivotal scenes. But in general, you're supplying lines, because when we go to the editing room, we take a bunch of different takes. You'll do 5 takes, 10 takes of a scene. So you have all these different performances of the same lines, and then you pick and you choose, because you're building a feel, and you're going. I like to, when I direct, kind of have, we'll do it one way, and then, okay, we got that, let's try it now, maybe the happier way, or maybe let's try it where you're more, you're more nervous about things or something. So basically what I get is, or faster even, let's do it slower, anything like that. So you have all these different pieces, and then when you go in the editing room, once you start stringing stuff together, it takes on a life of its own, and you can affect how an audience feels about a scene, or about an actor, or about a point in a movie by how the actor reads the line. And clearly you have the stuff you rehearse and the intentions you do on the set, but a lot of times it doesn't hold up, or it changes in the course of re-editing a movie or putting it together, and you never know. You can say and I find, you always see in like movies, the director's like, and cut, perfect, that's the take, and let's move on. I've had moments where I do that, and I gotta say 9 times out of 10, that's not the take I end up using, because what you're seeing immediately, you're watching as like a play, you're seeing it's farther away. Once you get in the editing room, somebody's face is like this, there's an expression in the eye that you don't catch live, and I always try to be close to the actors to see that stuff, but you don't know, and you just don't know how it's going to mix with the other things, so the more options you have, the better, and Jim was just great about that.
What would an actor say you are like as a director? What do you think they would?
Can we say that on?
Yeah,
is this something? No, I actually.
Family show.
Yeah, it's right. No, I have a very good reputation with actors, because I was an actor, and so I understand what they're going through. I mean, there's technical directors, and there's actors, directors, and then there's people in between. Acting is very, I wouldn't say hard, because it's kind of like, if you got a job in a coal mine, hey, actor, well, acting's hard, but it's a difficult job in that you're very exposed, you're very raw, you are taking chances constantly, and all you have is your director, and a director can really mess you up or make you look terrible. I mean, I always die when I see like a movie, and I see a performance, I go like, that performance is good, but the way it is being shot, the angle and where we're at and how far away or how close is affecting that performance, because if somebody's having a very small kind of reaction that's very closed and intimate, and you're far away, you're not picking it up. And just the same, if somebody's doing like a big thing because they think they're kind of playing for a room full of people, and you got the camera like this, then it's like, he's overacting. So it's a big responsibility as a director to be able to do that. And for me, I know how to create, I like to think I know how to create an atmosphere where actors feel safe. I also realize this is hard. This is the thing. I did an episode of Weeds, and Mary Louise Parker had a kind of a delicate scene where it was kind of a love scene, and I just by me being able to clear the set and say like, let's just, because she was like, she really didn't want people around, but some, as a director, you can go like, oh, well, screw that, you got to have these people around. It's like, no, I realize this is a very, so let's get people out of here so you can feel, you're creating a comfort zone so that people can act like they would in a situation where the cameras aren't around, because that's all movies are. You're just recreating situations from real life, hopefully, or what people would do in the situation in real life.
Well, how do you make the call of, sort of over-directing versus letting the actor just draw on their own experiences, or taking your direction?
Well, I don't like rehearsing. I'm very much against rehearsal. I like to kind of get there, we'll just figure out exactly where sort of they're going to be, for just so when they're walking I can have a camera on them or have a plan for it. But then I like to let people do what they do, just like do your thing, and then seeing like, we need a little bit of this, we need a little bit of this, they're missing this, or let me give them a direction to kind of get a little bit more. the biggest thing for a lot of actors, you just don't want to do this as a director, but some actors really are, some don't care, which is line readings. A bad director goes like, no, say it like this. I think you should go over there. That's just bad directing if you do that. Sometimes you work with kids, you're sort of forced to do it. But even at that, I don't want to do it because I'm then forcing the way I would say something into someone else's mouth, and every person in the world says something differently. And especially for comedy, I want to get something funny out of them. A reading I never thought somebody would say. They'll say, and you're like, the writer in you goes like, no, they're supposed to punch the, you're supposed to put the emphasis on the, the R or the. And they say it some weird way, and you go like, well, no, that's not right. But you have to kind of put that away and go like, wait, but that was funny, even though it's not how I heard it. And so it's just being able to create a situation where people can bring their personalities to things. There's a misconception among like amateur actors, which is you should be able to do anything. You should be able to fit into any character and become any person. That's true, but like, people always would point to Robert De Niro, especially, in his kind of, a few years ago when he was playing all these different varied roles, but he was still Robert De Niro. He said things the way Robert De Niro says them, and he had that charisma that Robert De Niro has. And so, the minute you're just so going outside of who you are, then you're not giving an honest performance. You always want to bring a piece of yourself to it. And as a director, I want to be able to help create that world where they can do it.
Okay, we'll take a short break and we'll be back in just a moment on the Bully Pulpit Show with Paul Feig. Back with writer-director Paul Feig. And Paul, I want to talk to you about The Office. Mm-hmm. You've been very involved with The Office. Talk about that.
Well, I was lucky enough to get to work on the first season was only 6 episodes long, but then the second season I got to do 4 episodes, and it was right when they were kind of figuring out how the British version of The Office. Mike, the Ricky Gervais's character is very mean and boorish and funny, very funny, but American audiences tend to get a little uncomfortable when somebody's just really mean all the time. So they're really figuring out the way to kind of transition Michael Scott, and Steve Carell's character into being a little more kind of lovable. And so it was fun. It was a fun time. The first one I did was this thing called Office Olympics, where he and Dwight go away to buy a condo, and then the rest of the gang just plays all these games. But it had this nice moment at the end where to kind of get out of trouble, and to cheer up Michael, who's afraid of buying a condo, they kind of award him the gold medal in the Office Olympics, and he doesn't know why. But then they play the national anthem, and they stand there, and he got into this thing where he started getting more emotional about it. And so for me, it was just like, go further with that, go. So they had this thing where he's kind of all teary-eyed at the end, and it just humanized him so much that it was that moment we all kind of felt like, oh, that's sort of the key to Michael, is to give him this extra humanity about himself. And I just happened to be lucky enough to be able to be there and help guide that along. But it's just so much fun to work on that show. The whole cast, it's one of the most pleasant experiences I have as a director, is working on The Office, because everybody is just so nice and fun, and there is enough of an improv style in there. Their episodes are very heavily scripted, but at the same time, Greg Daniels, the producer, is not afraid of letting these great improv actors he has, go off or try versions without it. And I did an episode called a Halloween episode, that just this ad lib little improv scene happened when Dwight was talking to Michael, and he was wearing like the Emperor's hood from Star Wars, and I noticed from the angle it was starting to look more and more like Star Wars, so we had him start talking more like the Emperor, and it was just this completely ad lib scene that Greg actually liked so much he ended up pulling out another storyline and putting that scene in, and that's what gives that show that fun energy, is everybody's kind of getting to do their thing. So it's been, I loved it. I'm doing an episode next week, starting next week. So it'd be fun to get back to them. I didn't do one last season because I was busy on my movie Unaccompanied Minors. So I'm happy to get back to The Office.
Well, talk about the books. You've got a couple of books, more on the way, I think.
Yeah.
You have a sort of a following that started, I guess, with Freaks and Geeks, and people that look to you for a certain kind of inspiration. What's that about? Who are they, and how do the books play into this?
Well, I mean, I feel like I like to try to be the guy, the spokesman for all of us out there who, we're awkward or kind of outsiders, and I always say I like to throw myself on the sword so that others may have a good laugh. There's stories you pull out where you're kind of like, did anybody do this? Generally, it's people are like, oh, I did that, I never told anybody, or I felt that, or this and that. So we occasionally get the stories like, oh yeah, it's just you, you're just weird. That's a chance one takes. But I love the people who are supportive of what I do, because it's just sort of the real people like us who have been and still are just kind of trying to get through life as happily as you can, and trying to be a good person, and sometimes being more optimistic than you should, because when you're optimistic, there's nowhere to go but down generally. But yeah, I have fun doing these books. I have the 2 books out, and then the book coming out next year, it's the first in a series of kids. It's the first fiction I've written, for a book, kids sci-fi adventure, kind of funny sci-fi adventure books called Ignatius McFarland, Freakonaut. So it sounds weird, but it makes sense when you read it. And the first one's coming out from Little Brown for young readers next year, and I'm hoping to do a series of them, at least 5 books. And I'm excited about it. It's fun.
Will those go to film, do you think, someday, or TV?
Who knows? Who knows? I mean,
You're not writing with that in mind.
No, you can't, because it's just too cynical of a way to write, especially for kids. It could work that way, but I really wanted to create a fun read for kids. And the nicest thing I heard my publisher was like, oh, we're gonna one of the things we're marketing to are reluctant readers. Apparently they have branded, there's a bunch of boys who just don't want to read, so they try to find stuff that they might like it. So this is for reluctant readers. So.
The kids who read Harry Potter but nothing else?
Right, exactly. We'll just slide right in there,
Well, what's a typical day like for you these days? You get up, and how do you spend your day?
Get up at noon, have a martini, then no, I'm sorry. As a writer, you tend to try to stay on a schedule. I've just learned over the years I do my best writing kind of before lunch, kind of when my brain is still kind of fresh. So I get up and walk the dog and try to have some kind of physical activity, and then I have a breakfast, and then about 9 o'clock, 9:30, kind of sit down at the typewriter at the computer. I used to have a typewriter, and work till generally about 1 o'clock, and then I go and have lunch by myself and kind of just take notes and kind of like to work through. I like to work all day, honestly, but sometimes the afternoon is more of a kind of mentally getting your head together and getting ideas, and just even walking around looking at things and just kind of seeing people. The creative process is very odd, and it's God bless my wife who understands how I work now. I know other writers who are just, their wives are like, what do? You don't look like you're working, but it's like, as a writer, everything kind of goes into it, and you can let yourself off the hook sometimes by just going, yeah, I'm going to do research, and you're at the bookstore and having a great time. But it's amazing how just kind of you can't write in a vacuum, I mean, you have to have moments where you go out and see real life. I've had so many times where I'm just stuck on something, and I'll go out somewhere or walk around, and I'll just see a person or have an interaction or see an interaction, and I'll go like, that's it, or you kind of get some inspiration from that. And so, that's the exciting thing about writing. And so it's to try to not make it a chore, and there is the chore. You have to sit there and you have to physically write, because otherwise you don't have anything. Mm-hmm. But I like to set goals too when I'm writing a script. I like to do 5 pages a day, if at least. And if I'm writing a book, I like to try to hit 2,000 words a day. Mm-hmm. Because then at least you go, even if you don't, it's terrible, when you don't hit your goal, you do feel kind of like you've failed. Mm-hmm. But at least you feel like you're doing something, you're getting towards something. And it's amazing how fast things add up. If scripts are generally 120 pages at the most, so 5 pages a day, you get a few weeks down the line, you actually have a first draft. Mm-hmm. So that's what you need, because there's so many writers just flounder, and it takes them so long to do things. And it's better just to blast it out. Even if it's not right, blast it out. There it is. Fix it.
Now, I think we've talked before about you running for political office someday. Is that in the cards? You're going to run for office someday?
Nah. I had moments when I thought about it, but You know what it is? I honestly I can't, because the 2 books I wrote have so many embarrassing stories in them. And literally, when I put out my second book called Super Stud, or How I Became a 24-Year-Old Virgin, I thought this, and now officially ends all my political aspirations, because there are such ridiculous stories in there that somebody could go like, well, look at this guy, could never run anything. But I love politics. I just love following politics. That's my sports. I'm not a sports guy, but I just love following the politics and the nuance of it. Because for me, in the business I'm in, it's all politics too. It's knowing how do you talk to certain people. And that sounds very manipulative, but at the same time, it's a very political thing. What is a studio looking for from you? What do they want you as a director? Not only your talent. Talent is one part of the equation in entertainment, but then there's a whole other thing. Are you going to be able to pull it off? Are you going to be able to be in charge? Or will you take responsibility? When you take responsibility, they're giving you their trust. Will you repay their trust with making their lives easier? Will you, do they have to micromanage you or not? So it's all knowing kind of like, not only I know how to do this talent-wise, but you don't have to worry about this, you don't have to worry about that, I'm in charge of this. So it's fun to kind of figure, and then it always shifts. The game is always changing, because now it's so corporate run. You're working for big corporations, and there's boardrooms of directors that you're trying to please now, not only just studio heads, and it's a business. So you're creating product.
What do you see coming in the political world? We've had sort of this Reagan revolution. We had Gingrich, Bush. What's the next 20 years? Will there be a liberal counterswing, or what do you see happening?
Nothing ever. In my experience is things don't ever tend to swing too far one way or the other. I'm a big Richard Dawkins fan, and just sort of the kind of how biology and these genetic systems work. And he always says, like, you can't. No society ever is too much. Is never completely this way or never completely that way. It's a very 50. We is just sociologically are very 50-50. It's like, because there's always a contrast to the other side. So it swings, and we've been in quite a conservative swing lately, but it's also because 9/11 just broke out the wiring of everybody's brains. Everybody was just terrified, and it still is kind of terrified, and it's created a situation where nobody wants to be the one that says, like, no, you're wrong, because we're safe and that can't happen, because then suddenly turn on the news and something terrible happened. So it's just made it it's a very tender, hooky time right now. But I think, you never know what's going to happen. I just want the country to stay a little more positive, and not just be, our whole purpose can't be about just protecting against terrorism, because then we're just all going to be in our shells and we're not going to do anything. You have to be cautious and take precautions, but also let's move beyond it. Let's be the beacon of hope and light and innovation that we always have been.
The Dawkins comment reminded me, there's a number of books, Dawkins, Sam Harris, and others, sort of made the case for atheism. Where do you come down on that spectrum, and what do you think about the sort of the theism-atheism debate overall, where we are as a country, or as where the world is now?
Well, look, I'll be honest. I'm an atheist, but I'm not a proselytizing. My feeling, I grew up in a religious household. My feeling is, whatever helps you get through the day and helps you be a good person and helps you do good things for other people, I'm all for. It's like, and if your belief system or going to church or doing these things helps you with that and gives you that code, that's fantastic. I would never say anything to make anybody feel weird about it. I just happen to have my way I see the world, based on things, and that is always ever changing, But yeah, I just lose patience with anybody from any side who says you're an idiot for believing or not believing or doing this or doing that. It's just like, live and let live, and monitor those who are, using it to put other people down or stop people from doing stuff. As long as people aren't doing the things that are bad, that are physically hurting other people or creating a bad situation for other people, then just stay out of it,
Do you think 9/11 has sort of contributed to that by showing what happens when religions collide? Is that part of the dynamic that's happening?
I think so. I honestly was surprised at how religious people got after 9/11, because I would think the instinct would be like, oh my, if this can happen, all bets are off. But I think it's great. I think, the last thing you want is everybody in any society to go like, there's no hope. It's all, it's a free for all, because then kind of, some people can handle it and it'll make them, focus more and kind of on humanity or what we got to do right. But other people will just lose their minds because it's like, mom and dad aren't home. Let's go crazy. And that's, I don't want to sound like the Marxists in the group was like, no, you need religion to control the people.
But does it ever feel lonely being an atheist? It's such a even people that have some form of religion, do you get kind of funny looks? Do you feel like...
I just don't hang it out there, even though I just said it on our show. You know, I don't like to... I don't like to bring it up because I don't like to talk about other people's religion. You know what it is? It's just kind of like it's just, to me, and it sounds so weird, it's kind of like the same as like people's sex lives. It's like, I don't want to know about it. It's like, that's what you do. If it's working for you, man.
But we're in a day and age when we have parades over sex.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, I know. I'm just not a fan of anything that has to do with like shoving things in people's face, you know. But I also, you know, I don't like people telling other people what to do. You know, there's a happy medium with everything. And, you know, my father always, his whole life was like, all things in moderation, you know, whether it's food, anything. And that's how it should be. It's like, just, you know, whatever gets you through your life, and you're happy and you're productive and you're, you know, you're not ruining other people's lives and making other people miserable, that's great, you know. Be that person, because that's just going to help the society just move along and be inspirational and moving up. Let's move up. Let's not move down.
Paul Feig, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.